Welcome to Making Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College, and today is March 22nd, 2024. Today I'm interviewing Professor Tom Badey, Professor of International Studies and Political Science at Randolph-Macon College. So to get things started, Professor Badey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how and when you came to teach at Randolph-Macon?
I've been here at Randolph-Macon College now for 26 years. I came in 1998. I had previously spent 4.5 years at the University of South Florida as a visiting and assistant professor, and got an offer here to come here in 1998. The main reason I came was really the physical difference. Classes, small classes at South Florida were 50, large classes were 120. When they told me I'd only have to teach 25 in a class, in a regular classroom, those really convinced me to come here. And the interview process here also, I think, was interesting. Both President Martin and Jerry Garris, who was the dean of the faculty at the time, sat in on the classroom lectures, and I had good conversations with both of them. So I decided this was a good place, a move to make from South Florida up to Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, how about your background before that? You want to tell us, give personal background.
I grew up, my stepfather was in the military, so I grew up in a military family, so we moved a lot. I myself enlisted in the military in 1979. I spent 8 years in the Air Force as a security policeman, almost 9 years. Traveled quite a bit, New Mexico, Colorado, South Dakota, Egypt, Korea, and then finally ended up in Florida again, down in Tampa, Florida. By that time, I'd gotten a master's degree from the University of South Florida and decided I wanted a PhD. So I got out of the military, got on a plane, visited some friends in Germany, and talked myself into University of Heidelberg in Germany, where I finished my PhD in 1994.
Mm-hmm. Wow, well then, with all that international experience living, and that's a good background for being a professor of international studies. You could actually have on-the-ground experience.
Certainly it helped. I think traveling and being open to other cultures and ideas, I think, was probably the main thing that attracted me to the discipline. And I was able to pursue the things that I wanted to pursue largely because I could travel and move from place to place, and do the things that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the recruitment process just a little bit, so the president of the college and the dean at the time sat in on your lectures. Tell us more about the department at that time. There was not an international studies department, as I understand it, was political science, right?
Oh, at that time, there were actually 3 parallel programs: the political science department, an international relations major, and an international studies major. I came out of the University of South Florida out of an international studies program, but really was hired to teach comparative politics and international relations. I came to the college in 1998 during a period of a number of transitions. President Martin had just come in a year earlier. The dean of the faculty at the time, Jerry Garris, was about to leave in the following year. And there were changes going on in the department as well. Earl Kuntz, who had been teaching comparative politics and international relations, had been part of the hiring committee, but he passed away before I got here. Howard Davis, who was the chair of the department, was due to retire in a couple of years. And Bruce Unger, who had been the young man in the department for almost 25, 30 years, all of a sudden now was the old man of the political science department. Just before me, 2 years ahead of me, Brian Turner had come in and served in the international studies and political science department. And just after me, Lauren Bell came in, I think in my second year. I was part of the hiring committee for her. So there was a complete change in the department as well as in the college administration going on in a period of about 2 or 3 years.
Wow, that really was a period of transition. So you met Earl Kuntz and you served briefly with Howard Davis.
Howard Davis,
very
yes,
briefly. And then Bruce Unger for several years.
Yeah, till he passed away also before retiring as well. not a good rating in our department in terms of retirement. And
Oh, goodness. Well, and then, so Professor Brian Turner, and then you came, and then Lauren Bell, who are all, of course, Brian Turner's retiring, but
That's right.
and Lauren Bell is still here. They're on sabbatical at the moment, but
Yeah.
yeah. So that was a period of transition, but it sounds like then it segued into a period of stability.
It did for a period of time. One of the other big transitions that started in 1998, 1999 is one of the first things I noted when I came in, the classrooms were way outdated. We had green linoleum floors in Fox Hall. We had high ceilings with bad lighting. There was almost no technology in the classroom. And really the first 4 years, I was very active in ultimately doing the first round of renovations for Fox Hall, putting down carpets, getting rid of the old wooden student desks and replacing them with actual chairs. We got a number of grants from the outside to work on technology and to start to install projectors. The college at one point allocated $90,000 for the Fox Hall renovations, and I was more or less in charge of about $55,000, $60,000 of that to buy new equipment, projectors, those kind of things, to essentially build modern classrooms.
Wow, that's great. So Fox Hall was one of the first buildings on campus to have that sort of technology.
That's right. We were starting to build things in, and most of that technology has lasted. We've got, I think, $40,000 grant from the Smarter Kids Foundation for smart boards, which were then installed in most of the rooms in Fox Hall. And we also, toward the end of the first renovation in 2002, got a Guathame Foundation grant that allowed us to renovate the lecture halls in Copley. The big lecture halls, to change the lighting, to automate the screens, to change the seating arrangements. They had swivel chairs before that. Most of those got uninstalled and replaced over a period of time.
I remember those swivel chairs. It was like a ride at the fair.
That's right, that's right. So we got rid of those, and actually, with the help of, at that time, Lois Todd over at Advancement, we worked together to do the Copley renovation in 2002, 2003.
Great. So there are several different directions we can go from that. I'm glad you mentioned the classroom technology, because that's very important. It has been continuing, as the college evolves, and that's one of the main things we need to keep working on.
Yeah, so
Have you stayed involved in that at all?
Yes, I think to some extent. The hardest thing early on was the negotiation between the various departments in Fox Hall, because each department wanted something different. And while now we keep standardized classrooms, or try to keep standardized classrooms, the reality is what we try to create is classrooms that could be flexible to many different things. So when we think about the computer lab in Fox Hall, where the monitors can flip down and you have a regular desk, or 107 in Fox Hall, the tables were on wheels because the philosophers wanted to be able to move them around at will. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at. Business econ was heavily involved in that, and George Lowry, who had many years of construction experience, helped me out a lot in terms of just simply looking at things and planning and reconfiguring rooms and those kind of things. So we got a lot done in those first 4 or 5 years I was here, and really changed, I think, the face of what classrooms looked like at Randolph-Macon.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, back to the International Studies program for a minute. So you said there were 3 programs when you came: Political Science, International Studies, and International Relations. Can you talk about the development of the International Studies as a minor and then a major? I guess it went in that order, as opposed to a track.
Yes, that already occurred before my time. And we had essentially, when I came in, we had 3 parallel programs where the political science was the department that housed political science major, international relations major, and international studies majors. And then we went through a series of economic crises. The first one was to merge the international relations with the international studies major, which essentially cut the budget in half and took out travel lines for everybody. And of course, now we're at a point in history where we're deactivating the International Studies program, and we will no longer have the International Studies program as of about 2 years from now. And the hope is to go back into the political science department and maybe modify the political science department to include in the title International Affairs and run all the international relations and comparative politics courses through the political science department. The main reason for that essentially is the fact that many of the faculty members who were active in the international studies programs retired. And we didn't get new people to replace them. Robert Behrend, who used to teach social geography, Fred Worth, Awicha Hilliard, Bruce Unger, everybody who was essentially active in Barry Fitznova in economics, all those were active in the international studies program. And Brian Turner's retirement, who taught one of the basic intro courses for international studies, that kind of leaves us with an army of one. And that doesn't really make sense to try to run a program with just one person trying to do everything, having other commitments in the political science department as well.
So many of those faculty you mentioned were in other departments, so it was a very much an interdisciplinary major.
That was the primary focus, and interdisciplinary. We pull on history, the languages, cultural studies, various other things. And students could essentially pick courses from different disciplines, in particular geographic regions, and build a major that would suit them and provide them with some expertise. With an emphasis on language skills. We wanted them to have foreign travel experience. We wanted them to have a speaking experience of the language. So we were looking for people who had that kind of broad interest.
So having all those language professors, that was great. Yeah,
that's right.
Good. Well, speaking of the travel experience, you want to talk about some of your travel courses that you've had through the years?
Over the years, I had many different travel courses. When I was at the University of South Florida first, I did a travel course to Germany for a group of people, and that really got me interested in organizing travel courses. Having lived in Germany for 18 years, I had a good sense of the geography, but I also traveled a little bit around Europe. The first travel course I taught at Randolph-Macon was a course to Ireland, and what I got was a travel grant to essentially scope out the possibilities in terms of a travel course in Ireland. At that time, we had a program down in Tralee that was partially owned by the college, run by a former professor of Randolph-Macon College, and that gave us a place to call home for a period of time. And the professor there could arrange lectures and outside people coming in. So essentially, the travel course was going down first to the Republic of Ireland in the south, and then going up to Belfast and touring Belfast with visits at Stormont. We had tea with the first Sinn Féin mayor of Belfast. We met in the south with, at that time, the only Sinn Féin representative member of parliament in the Dáil, the Irish Dáil. So we essentially had a great experience, got to tour the Irish Parliament and the Irish Senate, and of course some of the real sites in Ireland, the Dingle Peninsula, Stormont in Northern Ireland, the Parliament in Northern Ireland, and met with the legislator there. So it was a great experience first time around. And then later on, I was trying to think of another travel course, and I was eating lunch with some colleagues at the dining hall. And in a discussion, the idea came to me, well, I know a lot about Europe, why not teach a travel course in Europe? And then that became essentially a travel course in January term to London, Paris, Berlin, and then Brussels, headquarters of the UN, one of the headquarters, of the European Union. And that became then a standard travel course for a period of time. We'd spend 3-4 days in London to begin with, then take the Channel train to Paris. In Paris, we'd hit the big museums, and if we could, hit Parliament. That was always kind of a negotiation that had to take place, trying to get in the French Parliament. Sandrine Texador helped out a lot with that. Her father had a connection to one of the legislatures that got us into the French Parliament. When not, we visited the various embassies and places. From there, we either took a train ride or a plane ride to Berlin. Had a number of meetings at the U.S. Embassy in Berlin, but also met with a number of German legislature and the German Parliament and had conversations with them. Then after that, we take a train to Brussels and spend a few days in Brussels, essentially visiting the European Union Parliament and talking to legislators there. I think the greatest experience we had there, we were invited one time to participate in the meeting on the subcommittee, the European Union Subcommittee on U.S. Affairs. So we sat on one circle of the table, and the committee sat on the other circle of the round table with translators in the booth. And the first thing they asked us, well, what do you want to know? And the students started asking questions, and within about 10 minutes, the legislators were arguing with each other. The Irish taking a cheap shot at the British conservative, the Swedish legislator talking about essentially, yeah, we need more members of the European Union, where others, more conservative legislators, says, absolutely not. So it was a great experience. And then we went back to London, and Nicholas Baldwin from Roxton College had always set up tours for us of Parliament. So we visit the British Parliament as well, Upper House, Lower House, House of Lords as well, and got to talk to various members of the House of Lords or House of Commons to talk about politics there and how politics work there, and visited things like the Supreme Court, but always also the big museum, the British Museum, the Louvre in Paris, the Historical Museum in Berlin, to try to put a cultural context to the activities as well.
Wow, what a wonderful trip, and all that in a J term, which is very compressed anyway. That sounds wonderful. What a great experience for your students. Who was the professor in Ireland, just if you can remember his name? I shouldn't have asked you, because I think you would have said.
that was a dangerous question. I'm trying to remember. I remember him physically, but
I just like to have names when I can, and I should have known that. Okay.
Yeah, I remember we had a long conversation when I got there. He had taught at Randolph-Macon for a couple of years, and then I think in one of his first classes, a student died. And then he left and established a satellite program in Ireland, down in the Republic of Ireland.
Well, you know, when I first came here, I think there was still like an Irish studies subtract of history or something. I just remember there being, I was just intrigued that there was a strong focus on Ireland, and in our library collections, a lot of things on Ireland that I was a little intrigued by. So this was just interesting to me. I didn't know that background.
Yeah.
But so that travel course to Europe, and I'll let you talk about any other travel courses you like, but that kind of leads me to your Model UN program, if you want to talk about that.
Certainly. I had been the advisor to the Model UN program at the University of South Florida. And one of the toughest things, of course, with Model UN programs is trying to raise money for students to be able to go to the Model UN. And I had done that process several times. The other big problem is trying to maintain a stable program over time with limited resources and limited numbers of students. So that had been a challenge at South Florida. I sent a couple crews to Model UN, but never got to go myself at that time. So when I first came here, one of the questions was, would you be willing to establish a Model UN program? And I said, yes, but there are two conditions. First, we have to anchor it to an actual course. And so it was either international organizations course or international law, which were taught in alternate years. So it's a 3-semester-hour course. And two, I can't spend all my time trying to raise money for these projects. We've got to have a separate fund. And as early as 2000, 2001, the college established a separate fund for simulations that we still use in the political science department to pay for hotel rooms, to pay for registration, to pay for some of the meals that students take when they go to Model UN. And over the years, we've had a number of great experiences. We haven't always gone to Washington, D.C., although Washington, D.C. now is closer, and that's what we've done for the last several years. But we've been to places like Savannah, Charleston, South Carolina. Biggest trip, I got some funding one year to attend the Bonn International Model United Nations. We've got some funding from the German Academic Exchange Fund. So we actually traveled to Bonn, Germany, and had an international Model UN there.
Nice. So what, could students, since it was offered in alternate years, could the same student take the alternate classes? So
absolutely, because they're different classes.
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
Good. Yeah,
but the problem here particularly is that students, and this is true at the University of South Florida as well, students tend to get interested in Model UN in the junior or senior year, and it's very difficult to maintain a continuity of membership because you're always changing membership.
Yeah.
So I think it actually worked out best this way over the last 24 years or so.
Yeah.
It's worked out, and we've gone most years, with the exception, of course, during COVID. There was some talk about doing it online, but I didn't think the experience is the same. Interacting with people, talking to people, debating people personally is very different than trying to do it per video conferencing.
Where just any meeting can seem like a debate sometimes.
Yeah.
Right, right. Any other courses you would like to highlight? You taught.
Probably the most consistent course I've taught is the one that's really in the primary area of my discipline, and that's international terrorism. Early on in my South Florida career, they were looking for somebody to teach a course on international terrorism. The professor that was teaching it no longer wanted to do it, so I started teaching, and as I started teaching, I saw some gaps in the literature and started writing about terrorism, and that really got me into that particular subject field, which I continue to explore at various points in time. And I've been teaching courses on international terrorism now for probably 28, 29 years, if not 30. So it's been one of my primary areas of interest and primary area of studies. I was fortunate, I got to spend some time at St. Andrews, Scotland, at the Center for Terrorism Studies there, doing one of my sabbaticals. Came back, and then the following summer spent several weeks in Israel on a fellowship from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, traveling around with a group of people, essentially getting lectures on terrorism, talking to bomb disposal experts, talking to snatch and grab teams that the Israelis had going on the firing range with them and shooting some of the weapons, going into Palestinian prisons and talking to Palestinian prisoners, both from Fatah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad, and being able to directly talk to them. So it was a great experience that continued to help me focus on courses on terrorism and material on terrorism.
Now, did you do a summer institute on terrorism, or you had some students help write your annual reviews, or tell me about that. I'm not getting it garbled. But.
Over the years, I've edited 2 different anthologies on terrorism. I started early on in, I guess it was 2003, 2004. I took a 4th edition of an anthology, which is essentially a collection of articles on terrorism, and took it all the way. I think the last edition was the 16th edition. And what we do is every year and a half, 2 years, I'd bring together a group of students. We'd look at what we had in the present anthology and then look around for certain topic areas that we could replace with new articles and new research that we could add to the anthology. And essentially, they did some of the ground research, and I helped with the editing and trying to format it. And that was an anthology on violence and terrorism through McGraw-Hill that was in place for almost 20 years. And at the same time, about 2005, when the Department of Homeland Security was created, McGraw-Hill also wanted an anthology, a collection of articles on Homeland Security. So in 2005, I began that from ground zero, and that went into about 6 or 7 editions as well. So that went pretty well, and it really kept me in the material. It kept the students interested and excited, and I always had a group of students that were willing to do research and add to the anthology, and all of them generally got, well, all of them got credit in the introduction of the anthology each year, so they could essentially see their names, and they also, through the publisher, got a free copy of the anthology as well.
That's wonderful, building their expertise and resumes, and just the experience of doing that might just lead to their enthusiasm for it.
Yeah.
For the research. Good. You've also had surf students through the years.
Over the years, I've had a number of surf students. I served as the president of the International Studies Association, the regional organization, International Studies Association South, 3 times. Vice president 3 times, and a long-term treasurer. So what I would do is at various points in time, if we had students that had good research, I'd take them along with me to conferences, and they got to present their papers over the years in front of good audience. I had some great successes. A couple times our undergraduate students actually won the Graduate Student Paper Award at the International Studies Association. So the research they were doing was pretty good and solid, and the presentation skills that they gained were good as well in front of a very critical audience at times.
Well, that's the beauty of the SURF program, isn't it? It's really almost like graduate research. It's just at the undergraduate level. That's really wonderful. So the political science department had some Oktoberfest events through the years. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, over the years, and we've done this essentially most years. In the fall, October, having spent a lot of time in Germany at various points in time, I get a craving for bratwurst. And over the years, what we've tried to do in October is essentially have a grill out where I bring a case of bratwurst and some condiments and other things that go along with it, German rolls, potato salad, other types of salad. Brian Turner has generally paid for the drinks, non-alcoholic drinks as well, and we have kind of a Oktoberfest for the political science department and the political science department majors that can join us on outside in front of the library in those chairs, and we have a good time with it.
That's good. I also saw that you were you've been the advisor to the Randolph-Macon's ROTC program?
For a number of years now. Yes, although the program got hurt by COVID, of course, in terms of numbers of enrollment. We currently only have 4 people enrolled in the ROTC program, and we're in the process of trying to rebuild the program. But what happened was I had a couple students who were in R2C and needed an advisor, so I said, sure, I'll help out. And it's mostly helping organize tables at various activities, fairs, and if there's a room requirement that they have to have for a meeting or those kind of things, I help them out trying to get that. It was a good change of pace. Before that, I spent about 5 years working as the advisor for Macon Outdoors, the faculty advisor for Macon Outdoors.
Oh, okay.
Which was kind of like the National Guard, 2 weekends a month and a week during the summer. So we had a bunch of great trips that we did together, and I helped organize those trips. Ski trips in Massanutten and Pennsylvania, Seven Springs, Pennsylvania. We did a snorkeling, scuba diving trip down at Key Largo. We did a lot of camping trips, going to the Gauley and the New River for whitewater rafting, some hiking trips up in the Blue Ridge. So that was fun for about 5 or 6 years. I served as the advisor for the Macon Outdoor program.
Is that program still active?
It is. I believe now it's run out of the Student Activity Center.
Yes.
And we were fortunate back then to have a budget. We actually had an equipment locker where we had backpacks and even some mountain bikes and other equipment that we could loan out to students. And it was a fun period of time. It's a fun thing to do, although, like I said, 2 weekends a month and a week during the summer was more or less a pretty heavy commitment at the time.
Yes, yes. Well, and I think I saw a picture of you skydiving in relation to one of these. So would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, a few years back I was talking to the Richmond RTC program, which houses essentially the Randolph-Macon satellite program. We're part of the Richmond RTC program. And they asked if I'd be interested in jumping out of the plane. And having been in the Air Force for almost 9 years, I told them there's no way I was going to jump out of a perfectly good aircraft. Nevertheless, I thought about it for a while. I asked my wife, and she said, go ahead. I'm not sure why, but so I figured once in my lifetime, why not take the risk? So it was actually a great experience with the Golden Knights, the Army parachute team. They came down and we left Hanover Airport and came down here at the park that's out toward Route 54 out here, landed there with a parachute, alive and kicking, thank God.
But yes, I'm glad that that story turns out well. Good. Well, I appreciate your mentioning your service to the International, now I forgot what you said, this International Studies Association. I want to mention for the record recognition and award you've gotten at Randolph-Macon In 2014, you won the Thomas Branch Award for Excellence in Teaching. I want to highlight that for the record. And you mentioned already about helping to modernize the classroom technology. I'm sure because we're the nature of our college, you've done a lot of other service to the college, if you'd like to talk about any of that.
One of the first things, again, in the early years that I came here, the department wanted to establish a branch of the National Honor Society here. So I essentially did the application and the early paperwork to establish a chapter of Pi Sigma Alpha, the Political Science Honor Society here. Also, over the years, I served as chair of the executive committee of the faculty several times, and during turbulent times, let's call it that way. But it was a good experience as well, and it's an interesting way to keep track of what's going on in the college and the various committees and things that are ultimately going on.
Let's see. Now, you mentioned earlier, let's see, I believe it was in the context of renovating the classrooms that you mentioned Lois Todd.
Yes.
Tell us about, you said you were working with her on a project, so let's talk about that.
Right. Lois, who was Lois Todd at the time, now for 21 years as of yesterday, Lois Badey. We first met at the bookstore. She was practicing for a Christmas skit that Barclay Dupriest used to put on at the annual Christmas party, and she was in an elf costume. That's how we first met. Then in 2002, we've got, with her help, the Guathame grant to renovate some of the classroom over in Copley, and we'd worked together for a period of time. And on a Halloween evening, I was at the time living in the log cabin that the college owns across the tracks. And rather than waiting for trick-or-treaters, I decided to go to the Iron Horse, and she happened to be at the Iron Horse. So our first date was actually at the Iron Horse, and we got married on the 21st of March in 2003 at Wash Frank Hall. Daryl Hedrick, who was the college chaplain at the time, did the ceremony. Tom Porter and others ensured that the Wash Frank Hall was available for us so we could have the wedding there. We, for a period of time, lived together in the log cabin. She was working at Advancement. I was working in the political science department. Our wedding night was at the Henry Clay Inn.
What an Ashland romance.
It was indeed a very, I don't know what that says about us in terms of the expansion of our universe, but then Ashland is the center of the universe. So I think there was a spot on the college campus we could see all the important elements in our lives from there on. So yes, we met here and got married here and had our wedding reception. The cake came from Chartwell's. Melody ultimately put it together. And we had a small reception and dinner for family members up in the upstairs in Chartwell's as well. So we kept everything pretty local.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. That's a really sweet story. That's good. So are there any other experiences you'd like to talk about?
I don't know. I think there are many different transitions. I've been here now through various provosts. The title used to be Dean of the Faculty, and I think one of the things when that first transition to provost, I was actually the chair of the executive committee, and I was somewhat against that idea. I think there's a shift in the position of the provost that has happened. The lines of authority, the chain of command here is relatively short. It's from the individual to the department chair to what was then the dean of the faculty. And the dean of the faculty very often then represented the interest of the faculty. And I think with the naming, when Bill Johnson came in as a provost, that title changed to the provost. And I tried to convince him early on to maybe use a dual title, provost and dean of the faculty, to acknowledge both roles. But I think that role has more and more shifted toward essentially somebody who is more focused on the president's ideas than necessarily the senior leader of the faculty at Randolph-Macon. And we've had a number of great provosts here over a period of time. Jerry Garris, who I only watched for about a year, but he would go into the faculty meeting. There would be a lively discussion up in the Mullen boardroom, the liberal progressive side versus the conservatives. And at some point, Jerry was able to step in and just simply say, okay, we've talked about this enough, let's make a decision. And he had the gravitas and the goodwill of the faculty where that was acknowledged along the way. Robert Hollier probably was one of the better deans of the college, although there were some struggles implementing the ideas of President Martin, some of which the faculty resisted. So he was essentially very often caught between the faculty and the ideas of President Martin. Bill Frantz, certainly I think was one of the great provosts that we had over a period of time. He came from the faculty and essentially despite the fact that cuts and budgets and those things had to be made, he had the respect of the faculty for an extended period of time, and that gave him really the support from the faculty that he had over a period of time. So I think that shift, I think for me to dean of the faculty, provost, for me, I didn't think it was a positive thing because it essentially changed what I saw as the allegiance of the dean to the faculty to a higher allegiance to the president, for better or for worse.
I don't know if you want to say. I'll just ask what would some of the initiatives that President Martin wanted that the faculty would be in favor of.
I think there were always some things going around to President Martin. He had some great ideas in terms of putting things together, but very often they required a lot of student buy-in and faculty buy-in, and that wasn't always there in those kind of things. And essentially it led to at times a struggle between Dean Hollier and the faculty trying to ultimately get those things and programs done.
That was, I think, during the time when they had the first year experience. And
among other things.
Among
yes.
other things, because that was right around the time I came. It was
Yeah.
the first year that the first year experience was full on. And they'd had the pilot, and it was the full, which I thought was really a great, a very creative and innovative idea for a college like Randolph-Macon, interdisciplinary connections.
And it was a great idea as a small sample, as a study. But the fundamental problem was you never had the whole buy-in of the people, the faculty.
Right.
And the students, some of the students didn't like it either. So we reached a point, I think, with the first year experience where the faculty weren't engaged, the students weren't engaged. There were some great opportunities on a smaller level, but generalizing it over the whole college probably didn't work out as well as people thought it would when they first thought up the idea.
Right, because the people who participated in the pilot were enthusiastic,
Absolutely,
presumably.
absolutely. And then it
So
became
making it
pressure to do
required,
something,
yeah.
and that turned out very differently in terms of the program itself.
Yeah.
So it finally petered out. What we have now is the YJSS, which I think, and I taught YJSS in the last semester, and I have actually very positive feelings about this. I think it can be helpful. It can help students acclimate to college. It can provide them with some early information that ties them into a peer group and a captain who ultimately can be a source of information and a faculty advisor. And I think the program as it is now is a significant improvement in terms of what we had before in terms of the first year experience program. Although some of the cool stuff, I know Chaz Gowan and some others had some great programs for first year students. That's no longer on the table, but we're doing stuff that's manageable and people are willing to support rather than something that only applies to a small group of people.
Right, the YJS, that's something that's sustainable, right?
Yeah.
And I think meeting the needs of our students as they're coming in, especially after COVID, they're coming in with having that support throughout their fall semesters, I think a good thing, yeah. Well, talk about COVID, just COVID.
Well, it certainly had an impact on teaching. I think the transition in a matter of a couple of weeks deciding, okay, we're no longer going to have in-person classes. Now we're going to do video conferencing over Zoom. Trying to do that in a short period of time was certainly, I think, a big challenge. I think the thing that suffered the most is students' ability to learn. Much of the exams and those kind of things were take-home exams and essays simply because in that environment that's the only thing you could do. But the basic skills, remembering definitions, and I tell my students at the beginning of each class, you've got to know the basic terms and definitions, how they're used in a particular discipline. You've got to know the basic theories and concepts, and then you have to be able to apply those theories and concepts. And those three things together really is what my exams are structures around. And if you can only tying in concept, if you only do the essays, then you're missing essentially the basic skills that it takes. Okay, I have to remember what this actually means, not some definition I make up, but a definition that is actually accepted in that particular field of discipline. And I've got to understand what the theories and concepts are. And that's been the challenge really in the post-COVID environment. Students are just not used to the fact that they have to memorize things and actually spend a lot of time studying. Also reading. They have become increasingly more visual in their perspective, so they don't like to read as much or don't like to read at all in some cases. Even basic things like the syllabus.
Right.
Getting them to read a syllabus is a challenge, and very often they ask the same questions that are already answered 5 times in different formats. Probably the biggest change I see in the classroom is the impact of social media. And I'm very fortunate. I have at least one class right now where during breaks in the middle of the class, students actually talk to each other. And that used to be something that happened a lot before. Nowadays, if you take a break in a class, in the middle of a class, then what happens, everybody gets out their phones and goes on social media or TikTok to see what's going on along the way. And they no longer do the networking and communication that they would normally do, and the cooperation that essentially I think is essential to the learning environment. And it's a very different kind of environment. When people talk to each other, you have sound. There's lively activity. When they stare into the screens, it's dead silent for extended periods of times. And I think that's the biggest challenge, I think, right now, getting them to put down those cell phones and essentially talk to each other and engage with the material that's in front of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's just a challenge for this generation, and it's that's not even just a COVID. That's not a COVID thing. That's
no,
just
it's a generational challenge as well. Yeah.
Yes. Well, those are definitely challenges for our students. Any other challenges you see facing the college? I mean, we have plenty, I'm sure, like everybody does, but
I think one of the main challenges I think we face is to try to decide who we are in the long run. And that has changed over time. I remember in my first interview with Jerry Garris when I was being hired, Jerry Garris told me that we're at 1,100 students. We've tried more. We cannot sustain more. We're going to stay at 1,100 students. And since then, every year we've tried to increase students, to increase revenue, to be able to do other things along the way. And this has gradually led to an emphasis on more training kind of courses rather than education courses. And that gets us a little bit further away from the liberal arts. Language studies are the foundation of liberal arts. Introduction to different cultures, introduction to philosophy, those basic things are really English literature. All those things are really the core of liberal arts. And increasingly we're shifting resources into programs that are essentially designed to train students for certain occupations. And I think it's that struggle between the traditional liberal arts tradition and the essentially training tradition that are going to come in conflict in the long term in terms of the college, and that we have to figure out a way to master so they can coexist with each other, because I think both elements are to some extent important.
Well, what have been some of your most satisfying experiences at the college?
Most satisfying experience.
Well, just in general, if there's some.
Yeah, I think there have been many moments in terms of my experience in the college. Hitting the first Class 5 rapid on the Gauley River and watching the person in front of me fly into the air. There have been exciting moments. some hiking trips up Old Rag, seeing really the outcomes of various projects that I was engaged in. Early on, I realized here at the college that the college, for the most part, will let you do anything as long as you're willing to do the work. And that really became, particularly the first 10 years of my stay here, the resources were there. If you wanted to do something, as long as you were the person doing the work, they would support you along the way. And as resources began to dry up at about 2007, 2008, that became more complicated and more top-down driven than bottom-up driven kind of stuff. But I think it's still a part of Randolph-Macon culture. If you're willing to put in the work and the idea is a good idea, you'll find support from the administration and others for those ideas.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah, that's been my experience too. Any other memories or stories you would like to share?
There are many memories and stories. Some I should probably or cannot share in many different ways. But I think really the strength of this place for me has been really the interaction with other faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And faculty and family, I think that was kind of a Freudian slip.
Mm-hmm.
I think for many years we met each other at the lunch table over in Chartwell's, now changed name again.
Mm-hmm.
Over at the dining hall in Estes, and you'd sit down and you'd have a conversation with somebody over in biology, chemistry, economics, engineering, whoever was there at the time, and that's probably among my best memories, being able to converse with colleagues on different topics, with different perspectives and different ideas ultimately coming together. And that's certainly, in terms of academically, very satisfying. One of the things about a small institution like Randolph-Macon College is that you don't necessarily have many peers that do what you do. You don't have that kind of parallel study, academic echo within a discipline. But the idea that you can talk to others in other disciplines essentially broadens the scope of the discussion and broadens the scope of ideas. I mean, so I think that's been really the most rewarding part of my time here. That, and of course, I've had many great students over the years who have gone on to do interesting things, and it's great to see them successful over a period of time.
And many students that you still stay in touch with, and I know just feel connected to the college because of you and the courses they have with you.
I have some that still contact me at various points in time, significant parts of their lives at various points, and it's great to know when they're successful and how they're successful, and it's great to see them when they come back on campus and see how they've progressed over the years.
Well, we'll be interested to see how the transition from the international studies program winding down in the next couple of years goes, but I think folding those interests back into the political science can open up new opportunities, and we might be at another transition point as we were about 30 years ago when new faculty will be hired and the political science department will get a new focus.
I think structurally it simplifies things in some pretty good ways, as long as we maintain this kind of international outlook and international dimension within the political science department. I think while we may not have a specific international studies major anymore, we'll still have the ability of students who are interested in what's going on in the world to find and seek those courses and find and have instructors that can help them ultimately understand the world in ways that really international studies, the multidisciplinary program, does.
Which is important, more important now than ever.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Right. Well, Professor Tom Badey, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your memories with Macon Memories.
Okay, thank you.